5 knots everywhere this morning. Today in Auckland, fine apart from some morning cloud and evening cloud as well. Tomorrow, morning cloud, then fine spells. Today's high 20. Currently, we're sitting on 11 here at Newstalk ZB.
Judith Collins in the hot seat. It's the Leaders' Breakfast on the Mike Hosking Breakfast with Bailey's Real Estate. Altogether better across residential, commercial, rural and property services. Newstalk ZB.
Morning to you, 7:07. So each election year, the Mike Hosking Breakfast hosts a series of Leaders' Breakfast. 2 hours with the major party leaders, half an hour with the minor party leaders as well. Today, Judith Collins. This time next week, Jacinda Ardern. On Thursday, David Seymour, James Shaw and Winston Peters. Now, the idea is it gives us time to work through policy and ideas in detail. It's not a debate, it's a discussion. Might be a robust discussion at times, but the time allows us to explore and work through a level of detail and specifics that too often in the world of soundbites and one-liners doesn't really provide us. So the leader of the National Party, Judith Collins, is with us. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Now, you're late.
Yes, it's unfortunately, the diary had it for 7:25.
So we can't blame Auckland, or can we blame Auckland?
Well, we'd like to, but I tell you what, thank goodness I'm not coming from the shore.
Exactly.
So we could certainly blame the traffic then.
You've got a policy on Auckland and Auckland Council to announce, and we'll do that later on this morning. Let's deal first of all with the news of the weekend, so to speak. Are you politicising Christianity?
No, I'm not. In fact, I felt that quite... I thought that was quite abusive, frankly. I've been an Anglican all my life. I was brought up as such, confirmed, and we just happened to be voting in a church because strange enough they're open on Sundays. And the minister said, would you like to pop in and have a prayer, Judith? And I said, yes, I would. I didn't ask the media in, and I turned around and there they were, all happily taking shots. So I thought, gosh, well, I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing.
What do you pray?
Get up and be pushed around like that.
What do you pray for? Specifics or general guidance?
General guidance.
Do you get it?
I get the. I do actually, and I feel. I mean, some people like to contemplate about various things. They like to. To meditate, and for me, once a day, I find it as very helpful, particularly at the end of the day, but just happened to be I was in a church, and as an Anglican church, I was hardly going to turn it down.
So if you were Prime Minister this morning, couple of things. One, would the border be open in a two-way deal with New South Wales and South Australia?
Well, probably we'd have in place what we needed to do that, because we would already have had the Border Protection Agents in place. We would have a surety, would have the COVID tracing app in place. We would have the Bluetooth technology in place. We have all those things in place, and we can do things, but we'd be really careful to make sure we had them in place first.
So if they were in place, the border would be open. It would be a two-way travel bubble between New South Wales and South Australia as of this morning.
Well, only if they were in place and we were confident in them and we knew that they were working. But under the current government, I think that's... I don't know that they're actually confident they've got all of the technology working and they've got all of the everything in place. I think it's also true to expect that that could change from time to time depending on what's happening in terms of both jurisdictions or different jurisdictions. I don't see any reason at all why we wouldn't be looking at that. We have to make sure we're right.
If you were Prime Minister this morning, would Auckland be at level 1 right now?
Well, obviously. I mean, I think the whole thing's getting to a stage where it's just getting to be wallowing in COVID. We've seen no community transmission. The only ones coming in, the COVID cases, are those on planes that have been brought in from places where there is significant COVID. And they could have been stopped, a lot of them, if they were tested before they even got on a plane. It's just actually causing immense hardship economically and also stress level-wise to people.
Has Auckland been in level 3 and level 2.5 so-called for too long?
Well, I would have thought so. We haven't seen anything, have we, in terms of any community outbreaks. But I also think, too, is this is a third of the country, and frankly, lockdown should be the last resort. And certainly, a jurisdiction like Taiwan has been able to manage significantly better than we have in terms of numbers, but also a far greater population. They've never had to have a lockdown. So, when you talk about hard and early, or you probably don't, but Ms. Ardern does, actually it's real easy to close a border. It's real hard to open it up again.
Labor's announcement of a review into supermarkets and building supplies, is it needed?
I think it is in terms of certainly the building supplies, and it's something that we believe very firmly in the National Party that it's far too difficult to bring in and to use building supplies that are not from two major suppliers. It's also extremely expensive building supplies in New Zealand compared to in parts of Australia. So there seems to be something very wrong going on there. In terms of the supermarkets, well, it's a bit of a laugh, really, isn't it? 3 years ago, Labor promised an inquiry into supermarkets. Then what happened in lockdown? They basically took away the competition of all the supermarkets anyway, and we ended up with higher prices, in many cases, less choice, and we were directed down to major supermarkets or dairies.
An Auckland Central poll out over the weekend, you'll be aware of, the race is tightening. Labor still lead 35 to 30. Will you win Auckland Central?
I think there's a really good chance of us winning Auckland Central. We've got a very good quality candidate who's not wandering around talking about 5G or her concerns for it, which Labor has. So I think we do have a very good candidate and a real good chance. Certainly the Greens are trying to win it. Labor are trying to win it. We're trying to win it. It's a three-horse race, but I think we're on the momentum.
Is it impossible that Labor and the Greens would do a deal if the Greens didn't look like they were going to get above 5% by election night?
Well, I think that if they did do that, then that would make a mockery of all of their talk about not doing deals on it before. And I just don't know that they will do it. There's always a possibility, but I think that Chloe Swarbrick from the Greens is very determined to try and win it herself. I don't know that she'll be brought to heel.
You voted early. Jacinda Ardern's voted early. Does a lot of people voting early hinder your chance of victory?
Well, I suppose in many cases we'd rather that people waited because there's two major debates, plus obviously these sessions with you, Mike, are still coming. But I have no doubt about how I was voting. So that's perfectly fine in terms of it. I'm not going to change my mind. And from my point of view, it was actually an opportunity for me to get to vote. Because obviously you can imagine the organisation to that as opposed to being around the rest of the country and doing what I need to do.
A brief break. We'll come back with more of Judith Collins, who will hopefully arrive in the building in the next couple of moments. The leader of the National Party through until 9 o'clock, 14 past 7. Newstalk ZB on the Mike Hosking Breakfast, the Leaders' Breakfast, the first of 3 for this election campaign. 17 minutes past 7. This morning's guest is the leader of the National Party, Judith Collins. The Canterbury, and we're still dealing with news of the last couple of days, the Canterbury DHB and whether they deserve $180 million by way of a bailout.
Well, there is, about 2 debates ago, I did say that we would look to see what we could do, because what we found out is that, you know how the census got completely stuffed up when just recently, that was one of the reasons why DHB didn't get the funding it was supposed to get, because it's all based on population. So they underestimated around 5,000 people for the Canterbury District Health Board, and so they didn't actually give the funding that they were supposed to. So, look, I think the whole thing's been a mess, and I don't know why.
So you would argue structural as opposed to incompetence, which is the other claim?
Yeah, well, it was absolute incompetence around the government census, which clearly, missed about 1 million people. So I think Canterbury probably just didn't get the funding they were supposed to get. There was also a delay with finishing off the building for the new hospital, and that has caused an issue. But also, don't forget the capital costs that come with those new hospitals. It's I think it's more of a technical problem that they've got. But look, the hospital, DHB and the ministry apparently got some absolutely toxic work relationship. They need to sort it out, and writing off the debt is probably just the start of it, from the sounds of it.
All right, we'll come back to your policy on 20 DHBs later. Also in the news, though, the RMA, and we'll talk about that in depth later as well. But as far as the headline's concerned, Labor wipe it, you're wiping it. Why has it taken so long to realise what needs to be done?
Well, we said that about 2 weeks ago in the first debate. So it's like Labor's just basically followed now. So,
but replacing it with what, though? Because you can't have no regulation. To say you're getting rid of the RMA, you've got to replace it with something.
Sorry, the RMA. The RMA, well, I've said that actually for years now we have to use. So 2 pieces of legislation, and we worked on it last year when I was the spokesman. The first one is on a planning and development bill, and the other one is on environmental standards, which would very similar to what has happened in South Australia, where there's an opportunity to actually just cut through a lot of the red tape. It does mean that everybody from around the world doesn't get to say in what you do with your building, Mike. And I think that, that might upset a few really very busybody type people, but I think we just need to keep moving and get it done.
Also on the news this morning, universities are talking about redundancies next year, possibly hundreds of jobs at universities because the borders are still closed. They cannot get access to the international students. This will apply to high schools as well, of course. Would the borders be open more than they are at the moment to international students?
Well, they need to be. So they're worth $5.1 billion. As you know, they obviously connect through and help employ thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. Yes, and we would be working with the international student providers who provide accommodation now to make sure that they were set up and safe. Clearly, they'd need to have a quarantine system in place, and it would need to be checked by the Ministry of Health, or in our case, the Border Protection Agency, to make sure they were complying with what we would expect. But at the same time, let's just get real here. $5.1 billion industry. Not only is it these students this year, it's the flow-on effect for all the out years when students just simply don't come back here. And we are currently, students will be being poached by universities around the world and tertiary education providers who will now see New Zealand as a closed shop.
Brief break, and we'll come back with more with the leader of the National Party, Judith Collins, in just a moment. 7:21.
Good location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With One Roof, you'll find all the information you need, from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with One Roof.
How do you know when something's real? Is it real if you've read it? Heard it? Seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. How do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
And there you go. We got about 3 minutes before the half hour, so let's talk about your policy this morning, the Auckland Council.
Yes.
What do you want to do?
Well, look, I reckon they're a mess. So what we're saying is that in the first 100 days, put in place terms of reference and inquirers to actually go through and see how after 10 years of being all brought together into one council, what's gone right and what's gone wrong. And I think what we're going to find is more's gone wrong than what's gone right. In particular, we want to look at the whole CCO structure, which is the council-controlled organisations such as Watercare, but in particular Auckland Transport. I have a particular beef with Auckland Transport, Mike. I just think it's destroyed the inner city. They've certainly even come out to Papakura and helped to stick cycle lanes in Great South Road in Takanini, which is a huge transport hub, just completely ruining the area in terms no one's ever going to cycle down there, not if they want to live with trucks going to from. So the whole thing about them is just the arrogance and the fact that they seem to have no connection through to local boards or local people. It's just they decide they want to make everything cycles or walking, which is fine until you've got a whole pile of groceries or you've got some kids to take around.
So how would you change that, though? You can't get rid of them.
No, what we want to do is to actually review what they're actually doing, have inquiry into what's going on and what's working, what's not. And I think after 10 years of a whole new structure, it's a good time to do it. But look at Watercare, You'd think that was one of their better organisations, and here we are already still on water restrictions now after months and months and months. They knew about a problem about 6 years ago in terms of water, and they didn't bother to actually get it sorted out. So, yeah, we do need to do this.
Is that central government, though, encroaching on local government? As inept as local government might be, it's not your job.
Yeah, well, somebody's got to do it. And the thing is, it's the legislation is a central or Parliament set up the legislation to put them in place in the first place. So if these guys can't sort themselves out, we're going to have to do it. It's the number one issue when we around Auckland is Auckland Transport, but Auckland Council. Auckland Council's own review of their own performance had about 25% of people thinking they were doing anything useful. So, it's time that it happened, and I think it's a huge break on the economy in Auckland.
All right. In the next half hour of the program, we're going to be talking about the economy, the Reserve Bank negative interest rates, oil and gas bans, and the potential of a rural visa. Judith Collins, the leader of the National Party, until 9 o'clock this morning. News is next.
Thank you.
Good location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With One Roof, you'll find all the information you need from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with One Roof.
How can you tell what's real? Is it real if you've read it? Heard it? Seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. But how do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
To 1.2 megabits per second. Max SD stream at all times. Standard NZ and Oz numbers. Price
The Leaders' Breakfast with Judith Collins continues next on the Mike Hosking Breakfast. Thanks to HP. This is Newstalk ZB News.
Good morning. It's 7:30. I'm Nivareti Manu. Judith Collins claims she's not politicising Christianity. The National Party leader cast her advance vote at a polling station at St Thomas Church in Tamaki yesterday. A picture of Collins praying in the church beforehand has attracted criticism from voters on both sides of party lines. But Collins told Mike Hosking that criticism is abusive, and she's been an Anglican all her life.
I just asked the media in, and I turned around and there they were, all happily taking shots. So I thought, gosh, well, I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing.
And Judith Collins has just announced it will undertake an extensive review of Auckland Council. The National Party leader has just made the announcement on Newstalk ZB, saying the council and its governance needs to be fit for purpose. Judith Collins will be with Mike Hosking until 9 a.m. Jacinda Ardern's Leaders' Breakfast is next Monday. It's all on in the battle for Auckland Central. The latest One News Colmar Brunton poll on the electorate has Labour's Helen White on 35%, National's Emma Mello at 30%, and the Green Party's Chloe Swarbrick on 26%. Political commentator Ben Thomas says you wouldn't feel totally safe if you were Helen White.
Emma Mello would be feeling reasonably confident that there was a possibility of a vote split. Chloe Swarbrick would be saying, look, I've still got a chance with 2 weeks to go.
4 fire crews have been working through the night to battle the blaze in the Mackenzie Basin. The fire, which has ravaged up to 20 homes in Lake Ohau, started early yesterday morning and continues to be whipped up by strong winds. Fire and Emergency Commander Steve Jones says 2 of the crews were protecting remaining homes in the Lake Ohau village, with the other 2 working in the Quailburn area. He says an urban search and rescue team arrived yesterday and undertook an aerial drone reconnaissance at 2 a.m. Motorists are being urged to take extra care in Southland following the weekend of heavy rain. Flooding is affecting several towns and rural areas, with some residents of Invercargill's Venus Street being offered alternative accommodation for the night. Water levels remain high in most rivers, creeks and streams. And Newstalk ZB's Michael Sergel told Tim Dower several roads remain closed and driving conditions could still be hazardous.
Drivers this morning are being asked to be very careful of surface flooding and slips and be aware that not all flooding will have signposts up. There simply aren't enough signs for every bit of surface flooding there is.
Donald Trump could be back in the White House by tomorrow. Doctors tending to be to the US president have just given an update on his condition, which they say is improving. Dr. Sean Dooley told reporters at Walter Reed National Military Medical Centre that Donald Trump has remained without fever since Saturday and his vital signs are stable. Boris Johnson is painting a bleak future for the coming weeks and months. The UK has more than 482,000 cases of COVID-19 and leads Europe's death toll at more than 42,000. The Prime Minister says he's working flat out to ease restrictions by the festive period, but is making no promises. UK correspondent Gavin Gray says it's rare for the Prime Minister to be pessimistic.
This lays bare some of the fears that the government has, said there was hope in beating COVID, but he said the public need to act fearlessly with common sense and it's going to be bumpy through to Christmas.
That's Newstalk ZB News. With Fisher Funds Managed Investments, expect greater lifetime savings.
To Newstalk ZB Sport, Dominic Thiem has beaten Hugo Gaston in 5 sets to make his 5th consecutive quarter-final at the French Tennis Open. The US Open winner held on 6-3 at the end after dropping sets 3 and 4.
I was losing a little bit of energy. He was playing amazing, as I said, so many drop shots. I couldn't find the right answer to that. And in the 5th set, I found somehow new energy. Lucky that I made it through today.
Women's top seed Simona Halep's exited the tournament, beaten in straight sets by Poland's Iga Świątek in the 4th round. Rafael Nadal's pursuit of a 13th crown continues. He's beaten Sebastian Korda in straight sets. Premier League football humiliation for Manchester United. They've gone down 6-1 at home to Tottenham to slump to 16th on the table after 4 games. The defeat equals United's worst in the Premier League era and also equals their worst loss to Spurs, last suffered in 1932. Aston Villa have taken a 4-minute lead over Liverpool. Earlier, Southampton, West Ham, Arsenal and Wolves secured wins. Hawke's Bay are celebrating securing the Ranfurly Shield from Otago in their first defence. The Challengers won 28-9 at Dunedin and also stayed top of the second-tier championship table. South Sydney have claimed a 46-20 NRL win over Newcastle to eliminate the Knights from the competition, despite trailing 14-0 in the first half. Elsewhere, the Roosters play the Raiders, while the Panthers and Storm take the week off after opening victories. Eliud Kipchoge's dominance at the London Marathon has come to an end as Shura Kitata emerged from the rain and the gloom to win. Kipchoge had won each of his 4 previous attempts and hadn't lost over the distance in 7 years. And the White Ferns are recalibrating after losing Susie Bates to a shoulder injury ahead of the second of 3 Rose Bowl one-day cricket internationals against Australia in Brisbane. New Zealand are 1 match down in pursuit of a trophy they haven't won this century. I'm Andrew Alderson and that's Newstalk ZB News and Sport, 2:25 minutes to 8.
Newstalk ZB Auckland. Time saver traffic.
Voting is now open. Don't wait until election day. Now the Southern Motorway city-bound moderate TV Takanini through to Manurewa picks up again after Manukau. The northern city-bound slow from Sunnynog, southwestern southbound. Moderate approaching Hillsborough. Moderate TV flows on the northwestern city-bound from Lincoln. Find your nearest voting place at vote.nz, brought to you by the Electoral Commission. Ivanka Zonich for Time Saver.
Newstalk Z. ZB Weather Watch 24/7 with 0800 Roof Care for up to 15 years guarantee on roof painting. Manukau, southwest 10 knots, Waitemata and the Hauraki Gulf, southwest 10 easing to variable 5 this morning, northerly 10 developing for a time by the afternoon, and Bream head to Cape Colville, southwest 15 knots but 20 about the Colville Channel, easing to variable 5 everywhere this morning. High tide at Auckland 10:30 this morning, Onehunga 1:30 this afternoon. Today fine apart from some morning and evening cloud. Tomorrow expect morning cloud then fine spells, and ahead to Wednesday cloudy periods with light winds. Today's high 20. Tonight's low 11. Currently we're sitting on 12 degrees here at Newstalk ZB.
Putting the hard questions to Judith Collins, the Leaders' Breakfast on the Mike Hosking Breakfast with HP, New Zealand's #1 selling PC and printer brand. Newstalk ZB.
23 minutes away from 8, Judith Collins this morning. Jacinda Ardern next Monday, this time next week for 2 hours between 7 and 9, and on Thursday morning, half an hour each for Seymour, Shaw and Peters. Judith Collins is with us. Let's talk about the economy in general. Just from the last half hour, one thing I didn't cover off on the education side of the equation, the Polytech upheaval that's gone on under this government, or going on under this government. You reverse it. One, why? And two, isn't that just more upheaval on top of upheaval?
Well, you could say that, but actually you can't just continue down a path just because someone started it and it's clearly wrong. We've got now around 22, I think it is, new chief executives in the new organisation with a chief executive on top of that. It will make no difference at all in terms of Polytechs, the current regime that the government's put in. They call it ROVE. Review of something around vocational education. But what it does do is it takes away the ability of places like SIT or Southland Institute of Technology and others where they've actually got some innovation going on and where they have been able to compete against other organisations and to bring in international students because of their particular fee structures. It's just, look, any merger and acquisition, about 70% of them fail. And that's what they're doing here. They're actually just merging a whole lot of dysfunctional organisations with some good functioning ones and then saying, well, we hope it'll all end up really well. What happens? Lowest common denominator. It happens every time they do this, and we end up having to go backwards. So we might as well just say now, just stop it.
So there is truth to the fact that there are some struggling.
Yeah.
What then do you do?
Well, what you do is you put effort into those ones, and some of them would need to close, obviously, and others would need to merge with others. It just depends on what state they're in. But what you don't do is just take all the well-functioning ones, stick them in with the not well-functioning ones, and because what always happens in an organisation when that occurs, almost always, is that the lowest common denominator, the culture of the organisation, is set by the lowest performing organisations.
All right, we'll come back to that later on if we got time in education generally. Is Adrian Orr doing a good job?
Well, I suppose so. I've met with him, obviously, several times, and I've been on the Finance and Expenditure Committee until recently when I took over leadership, and I've met with him since then. His way of dealing with things is simply to quantitative ease. In other words, basically just put fake money back into the market. That's essentially what it is. And to put that money as a transfer into the banks. So I don't know what else he'd be doing at this stage, given that that is what's happening all over the world. But even he said worst economic times in 160 years is what we're going into. So I think at least he understands the situation, because I don't think that the government does.
So you trust him?
I think I trust him for telling us the truth about what he's doing, and for at least having a plan to get us through some difficult times. But he's not someone who, he's very frank about the fact that he's going to have to make some stuff up as he goes along.
The reason I ask the question is we're heading towards potentially negative interest rates next year. Australia seem determined not to head towards there, and the Bank of England don't seem to be keen either. Are they right and we're wrong, or are we right and they're wrong, and do you worry about that?
Yeah, earlier this year, Adrian Orr told me that they were, he didn't think we'd end up in negative interest rates. He didn't want to use that lever. And now it turns out he's now thinking, well, maybe he does need to. I think the problem is that negative interest rates has its own its own downfalls, as everyone can understand, and then we can end up with some form of hyperinflation again out of this. I would, at least I note with him, he tells us what's going on and he tells us what his thinking is, where I think he's got himself way off keel with a lot of businesses, in particular, is his embracing of the the very woke well-being budget nonsense. And frankly, look, that's when we hear Reserve Bank governors going down that path, it does worry me. I'd actually just like them to stick to their knitting.
Your debt reduction target, 36% of GDP by 2034. Where do the cuts come to pay for that?
Well, it's not so much cuts, it's actually not so much increases along the way, and it also means that we're not putting money into holding back money, putting money into the super fund for a while, and what that means is we're not borrowing money to go and put it into the offshore markets. I think it's also important to understand is that part of that is actually paying for infrastructure here, investing in New Zealand infrastructure rather than overseas infrastructure.
The tax cuts, Australia's making them permanent as of this week, as we understand it, in their budget. Did you countenance the idea of making them permanent here?
Yeah, absolutely did. And our view is that 16 months is certainly better than none at all, and that the economy needs an immediate shot of adrenaline. And that shot of adrenaline can't be, because after we've had all the morphine of wage subsidies of $500 million a week, the cost of a whole new hospital, if you're thinking about it, that we do need an immediate adrenaline pump, and that would have to be the tax cuts, which would be about $3,000 for your average earner.
See, one of the arguments is that with the wage subsidy, once the wage subsidy stops, people fall over. So we're starting to see some of that now, for example. Isn't that exactly the same argument with the tax cuts? You give people the adrenaline, you give them the cash, they spend the cash, it goes into the economy, suddenly, whoop, you pull it out. Then what happens?
Well, we've been very clear that if we were able to, or if we felt we could do, or we should do, then we would make them more permanent. But at this stage, what we're saying is we're counting on 16 months, and we believe that it's not just obviously tax cuts, money going. It's not just a sugar hit or anything like that. What it is it actually gives huge confidence to businesses and people, but look at the other side of it too. The other part of it is the business depreciation rules that we would be changing. So that means that if you're a business, you want to go out and buy up to $150,000 for plant and machinery, a capital item, even software, say, then you can write it off straight away. That's opposed to only $5,000 you can do at the moment. That will encourage people to buy bigger, but also anything over $150,000, you'll get double the depreciation rate. So that actually means plant and machinery. So you're not going to buy a new piece of plant, Mike, if you haven't got someone to work it.
No, indeed not.
So that's the way to do it.
You also got $20,000 out of KiwiSaver for a business start. Is KiwiSaver a bank or is it a retirement scheme?
Well, it's a retirement scheme, but I'll tell you this, Mike, it's your money, not mine. And that's the point.
You'll also, sorry, Karen.
So why shouldn't people be able to use it for themselves? And after all, it's not compulsory, but if they want to do it, why not?
You're also going to repeal the Employment Relations Act. We'll come back and have a look at that in just a moment. Leader of the National Party, Judith Collins, 16 to 8.
At Glenorchy Air, every seat on every...
Location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With OneRoof, you'll find all the information you need, from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with OneRoof.
can you tell what's real? Is it real if you've read it, heard it, seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. But how do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it. In New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
Away from 8 on the economy generally with the leader of the National Party, Judith Collins. Let's bolt through this as quickly as we can. So you repeal the Employment Relations Act, 90-day trials are back.
Yes, absolutely, for everybody.
And they work.
Yes, they do. They get people into work, and they also give businesses confidence to give people a go when that person maybe there's something with that person, maybe there's something in the background, maybe they're not quite qualified enough, maybe they're not that experienced, maybe they don't know them that well, maybe they're a different ethnicity. You know, this is about actually giving people a chance.
Oil and gas, the ban will be reversed.
Yes.
What about climate change?
Well, it's not making any difference at all to climate change. I mean, New Zealand's 0.2% of the world's carbon emissions. And the other thing where it is probably very helpful is to have natural gas, which burns at half the emissions of coal. What we're seeing with the current government is coal use has gone up, our emissions have gone up. It's not the oil and gas that was the problem. In fact, the world's awash in oil, but gas is something this part of the world. We've got potential to be the south, well, basically the North Sea in the south, with the seismic testing I've seen when I was Minister of Energy and Resources off the east coast of the South Island. There's enough there, according to the geologists, for basically looks like a North Sea. And that's how come places like Norway became so rich, so that they could then do all the things that they do. But of course, you know, we've got fear being stoked up by the Prime Minister. 0.17% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Come on, we're not the problem, we're the solution.
TY, have they played all of you for suckers? Ultimately, you've all got basically the same policy, which is to help them out.
Well, they've all come along. Yeah, probably have, actually, in terms of the fact that it's really hard when you're looking at 100,000 people unemployed, according to Treasury, in the next year or so. Being told, well, we've got 2,200 people whose jobs are going to be lost because of TY, both in TY and all the the surrounding parts. So it's a big ask to say that. And the other thing too, though, is that TY has been overcharged when it comes to transmission costs of electricity, because it doesn't bear any relation to what the real cost is.
So the reality is, if you can be really big in a small part of New Zealand, you can basically engineer the government's policy towards you, can't you? That's what it boils down to.
Well, there is a legitimate cause, and that's around the transmission costs. The other thing too, for all those people who absolutely feel that climate change is their big issue, understand this, is that aluminium in TY Point is made with 100% renewable electricity, cleanest aluminium in the world. If it goes offshore, it's just going to be used by either nuclear or more likely coal. And that's where most of them are.
Visas for foreign skills, what do we do?
Well, we have to have visas for foreign skills.
But how many? Do you set a target, or do you meet demand and supply, or what?
We need to be able to get the information from the horticultural and the agricultural sectors, but also tech sectors around this. So we need to be able to do this. And that's why we have to have a border protection agency that actually knows what it's doing. And we've got Ministry of Health one day, housing the next, all these sorts of different ministries involved in it. But yeah, we do actually have to have them in, and that's why in the first 100 days we have the Border Protection Agency set up. We'll be able to bring people in. And the other thing is, if you bring in skilled staff, then you're going to have to pay for their accommodation, their quarantine. And some of the places that we've talked to, they actually have accommodation that they can do this with, but they should have to meet standards and they'd have to be checked, audited.
All right, we'll talk about the farmers and the farming in just a moment. 9 to 8.
Good location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With OneRoof, you'll find all the information you need from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with OneRoof.
It's the most important election in a generation, so we're putting the questions you want answered to the politicians vying to lead the nation for the next 3 years. From COVID-19 and border security to the economic slump it's brought with it, we'll get the leaders' plans for jobs, education, housing, the environment and healthcare. From the front gate, farm gate, or the front line, submit your video questions to us on your favourite social platform for the leaders of National, Labour, ACT, the Greens and New Zealand First, and watch live as we put them to the parties on nzherald.co.nz. It's your vote, so we're getting your questions answered at New Zealand's home of Election 2020.
How do you know when something's real? Is it real if you've read it? Heard it? Seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. How do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
Talk ZB.
6 away from 8. After 8, we'll get into the business of housing, possibly foreign relations. Just let me finish off. I want to talk about the rural sector of this country briefly, but immigration, just to wrap it up. 72,000 net gain was roughly where we were before all of this happened. Is 72 too many?
It probably is, but that's why you need the housing sorted out. But look, 3 years ago, the government of the current government said that they were bringing it down to about 10,000 net. It actually went up by about 20,000 net. So they saw how hard it is to actually bring it down and still have the economy moving. But it's really clear that we have basically no immigration at the moment.
No,
other than,
that will presumably one day come right, hopefully.
Yeah.
The criticism of the previous government, as in you and John Key, was that you let too many people in, it stoked housing, and basically all the growth came from people lobbing up in this country and nothing more.
Well, I don't think that we were, if we'd had another term, we would have actually been able to deal with some of the drivers around that. But I can tell you, in terms of productivity-wise, immigration's not a problem if you have the housing in place and you have productivity coming from it. But you can't just keep having immigration, nothing, and wonder what's going to happen. I can tell you what's going to happen is that everything starts to fall down because we're not even replacing, well, we're just replacing ourselves in terms of population. And look, I don't see the immigrants as the problem. I actually see most of our problems are homegrown.
We'll talk about the housing, as I say, after 8 o'clock. The farmers, in terms of their contribution to the economy, and I know what you've said as regards the Labor Party and their attitude towards the farming community, there are farmers out there, though, that need to do better, yes?
Oh, there will be, yep.
And they need regulation to do better.
Yes, but I also know that most farmers are doing really, really well. They, dairy farmers have, by themselves, without any help from anyone, fenced 98% of their waterways. I mean, that's an enormous task. They've been doing this work. And don't forget this, Mike, is our innovation and technology is what's actually allowed New Zealand farmers to be the most efficient and effective in the world. So they've been used to actually embracing technologies and even things like methane gases and ryegrasses and things. They want to embrace all those and do them. There's a reason that their food brings us premium products, premium prices.
Let's talk about housing and education after the news, which is next on our Leaders' Breakfast. First of our Leaders' Breakfasts with the Leader of the Opposition, Judith Collins.
Leaders' Breakfast with Judith Collins continues next on the Mike Hosking Breakfast. Thanks to Jaguar Freedom Finance. This is Newstalk ZB News.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock. I'm Niva Reddy Manu. The National Party wants to put Auckland Council under the microscope with an extensive review. Judith Collins has just announced that if her party's elected, terms of reference and reviewers will be put in place within 100 days of being in government. Legislation would be updated by March 2022 in the hopes of improving the performance of Auckland's council-controlled organisations. Collins told Mike Hosking they're a mess.
Look at Watercare, you'd think that was one of their better organisations, and here we are still on water restrictions after months. They knew about a problem about 6 years ago and they didn't bother to get it sorted.
Judith Collins will be with Mike Hosking until 9 a.m. Jacinda Ardern's Leaders' Breakfast is next Monday. A total of 14 crews will continue to fight a fire spreading across almost 5,000 hectares in the Mackenzie Basin this morning. Fire and Emergency Commander Steve Jones says the blaze has moved south of Lake Ohau village, where there are reports up to 40 or 50 homes and structures have been destroyed. It's been contained in a basin between the lake and Quail Ridge Road.
There is quite a lot of high wind through here this morning, and it's projected to increase. So that's our concern, that we don't want to lose any more houses.
Steve Jones says the fire has moved into farmland, which has reduced the size and speed of the fire. He anticipates the blaze will be well contained and under control by this afternoon. Around 11 helicopters will also be joining their efforts this morning. People who have lost their homes in the blaze have spent the night in motels, holiday parks and with friends and family. New Zealand Herald reporter Logan Church is at the event centre where locals can get information and support.
They're expecting to get an update sometime today as to how their property has fared during the fire. Some people already know if they've lost their homes, other people do not.
Calls for a Trans-Tasman bubble are growing louder than ever. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced quarantine-free travel into New South Wales and the Northern Territory will be set up by the end of next week. But Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says we're not ready to open up to Australians. Tourism Holdings Limited boss Grant Webster told Mike Hosking, with movement from the other end, now's the time to push conversation on a travel bubble.
There is enough activity from Australia that we think we could see New Zealand rebound to numbers that could see us a sustainable, profitable industry again.
A New Zealand company has been awarded just over $3 million to produce a COVID vaccine. The COVID-19 Vaccine Corporation was set up in May and aims to use Kiwi technology to create a biobead vaccine, with the first human trial expected late next year. Its chief executive, Robert Feldman, says they're not aiming for the first vaccine on the market. They're aiming for a cheaper and more efficient one.
We don't believe that the first vaccines are going to be ideal. There's going to be a need for vaccines to come along afterwards that are perhaps more protective.
And staying with the COVID situation, the Prime Minister says things are tracking well ahead of a decision on Auckland's alert level status. Cabinet will meet today with Health boss Ashley Bloomfield once again set to present his recommendation to ministers. Jacinda Ardern says any possible move won't happen for at least 48 hours as it needs to be gazetted. She says that given the seriousness of the Auckland outbreak, they didn't make an earlier in-principle decision. That's Newstalk ZB News with Fisher Funds Managed Investments.
To Newstalk ZB Sport. To South Sydney NRL coach Wayne Bennett sticking by his claim that domestic violence and drug use allegations involving ex-captain Sam Burgess are not affecting the team. The Rabbitohs claimed a 46-20 win over Newcastle to secure their spot in next week's semi-finals. Bennett says it's proof the investigations aren't distracting.
Had no impact on the team. Wasn't going to have an impact on the team. Still has, it won't. I coach the team. I know what's going on in the organisation.
Elsewhere, the Roosters play the Raiders next weekend, while the Panthers and Storm take the week off after their opening victories. NRL coverage with Pit Stop save up to $100 with their break special. In iron racket, but a velvet touch. After losing the opening two sets, Frenchman Hugo Gaston has taken Dominic Thiem to 5 at the French Tennis Open with an exquisite display of finesse. Thiem's reached his 5th consecutive quarter-final at Roland Garros, but with the utmost respect.
I haven't seen for a very long time a player with such a big touch in his hands. I mean, his drop shots are just from another planet. I was sprinting like 400 times to the net.
Women's top seed Simona Halep has exited in straight sets to Poland's Iga Świątek in the 4th round. Hawke's Bay celebrating securing the Ranfurly Shield from Otago in their first defence. The Challengers won 28-9 at Dunedin and also stayed top of the second-tier championship table. Aston Villa have a 4-1 lead over Liverpool approaching half-time in their Premier League football match at Villa Park. Villa's record signing Ollie Watkins has scored a hat-trick. Earlier, 10-man Manchester United suffered a record equalling 6-1 defeat at home to Tottenham. Southampton, West Ham, Arsenal and Wolves also had wins. And a man-of-the-match performance from Trent Boult has helped Mumbai to a 34-run victory over Hyderabad in cricket's Indian Premier League at Sharjah. The left arm has taken 2 for 28 from his 4 overs, including 11 dot balls in the dismissal of New Zealand captain Kane Williamson. I'm Andrew Alderson, and that's Newstalk ZB News and Sport to 8:05. Mike Hosking's next.
Newstalk ZB Auckland. Time saver traffic.
Won a share of $12,000 at Lynmore. Now the Northern Motorway slow coming in from Sunset Road. Moderate to heavy on the Southern Motorway citybound from East Tamaki. Moderate to heavy on the Northwestern citybound from Lincoln. Moderate flows southwestern southbound approaching Hillsborough. Visit Lynmore. Spend $120 and spin to win. T's and C's apply.
Newstalk ZB Weather Watch 24/7 with 0800 Roof Care for up to 15 years guarantee on roof painting. Manukau southwest 10 knots, Waitemata. Also the Hodaki Gulf southwest 10 easing to variable 5 this morning, and Breamhead to Cape Colville southwest 15 knots but 20 about Colville Channel. High tide at Auckland 10:30 this morning, Onehunga 1:30 this afternoon. Today fine apart from some morning and evening cloud. Tomorrow expect morning cloud then fine spells. Auckland's high 20. Currently we're sitting on 12 degrees here at Newstalk ZB.
The policy versus the personality. Judith Collins, the Leaders' Breakfast on the Mike Hosking Breakfast with Jaguar Freedom Finance. Guarantee the future value of your vehicle. Newstalk ZB.
It is 7 minutes past 8. So the Leaders' Breakfast, Judith Collins. This Monday, next Monday, Jacinda Ardern. And on Thursday, we remind you between 7:30 and 9, James Shaw, Winston Peters and David Seymour for half an hour each. It is 7 minutes past 8. To housing, are houses in some places in this country too expensive?
Well, they probably are, and what I think is going to happen with housing is that we need to have, obviously, a large number of houses built, particularly around the very much affordable range. But I think what we're going to see is that the market will sort out those houses that are overpriced and where they are. I mean, it's just pretty obvious that when we have almost no immigration at the moment, when we have people worried about whether or not they've got a job, and 100,000 supposed to be losing their jobs next year, according to Treasury, there is obviously going to be some form of downturn.
Correction.
It's going to have to be. It's just that's the way it works in the real world. And even though interest rates are really low and it feels cheap at the moment, interest rates do also have a way of going up.
Can governments manipulate the housing market? In other words, can the government build enough houses to do with the housing market what the government wants to do with it?
Yeah, well, we did it in Christchurch after the earthquakes, where we actually built an awful lot of houses by just taking out the RMA in terms of consenting, mass consentings, just let people get on to get the houses built, took out the delays, and what we've got now in Christchurch are house prices that have actually fallen or certainly stabilised. There's no house inflation in Christchurch. Why? Because there's lots of houses.
We talked earlier on in the program about the RMA briefly. Let's go back to that. So Labor announced it on Friday. I don't know what they're replacing it with. They announced they're getting rid of it. I don't know what they're replacing it with. You've announced that you're going to amend it. You wanted to amend it last time you were in government. You couldn't do it, didn't have the numbers.
That's right.
What do you replace it with? What's it mean?
Well, what it means is that, and this is where people should be concerned, because Labor are very keen on making it more difficult in many ways around any development that involves anything that people might consider, a resource, whether it's land or anything else. We know that it's really difficult to get houses built at the moment in any time frame because of the RMA and the fact that everybody gets a say about what you do on your own land. So the method that I believe is the right one is in South Australia, where there is a real opportunity there where a government will sit around and say, look, we're going to need this sort of number of houses. Councils, you get off and consent them. If you don't consent them, we'll do it for you. We'll just do a mass consent. And that's exactly what we did in Christchurch. That is quite big government. But I tell you what, Mike, when people are saying government sort it, it's the only way to do it. And the other thing is actually putting a lot of these consents online so people aren't constantly waiting for an inspector to come out and look at it, because you could video it, send it through to the inspector. They can do it in the house, in their office. The time involved with 13 inspections for a single-storey house to be built in this country, the time delay is all costs that ends up being paid for by the house owner. So, it's about 3 inspections in the UK. We now have technology. We can do what we like. The other thing is we treat like single-storey houses or 2-storey houses like they're multi-level apartment blocks. Just have one agency for the multi-storey apartment blocks. People who actually just do that So, yeah, it would make it a lot faster.
I'll come back to housing in a moment. Just briefly on the RMA, though. CRL over budget, up to $6 billion already. The Puhoi motorway has been going forever and is due to end, I think, next year, maybe not. Transmission Gully. It seems to me we can't build anything in this country on time to budget. So is there any point in announcing an infrastructural budget if you have no idea what you're actually going to get for the money, and how do you address that?
And that's a very good point, which is where we come in with our infrastructure bank, National Infrastructure Bank, which we would set up. And that would be more like an investment bank. So we've got a big infrastructure projects. We want to put some public money into it. We might want to bring some private money in as well. Private equity funds or superannuation fund or ACC or any of these funders and investors, I should say. Get them into it and actually just have all of these projects checked by them to make sure we've got the right funding in place, but also the contracting, because government departments are notoriously bad in contracting. Partly it's because they keep shifting chairs, changing ministries from time to time, but also, tell you what, Mike, if you're entrepreneurial, you don't generally go and work in government. If you had any experience in big construction contracts, you generally don't go and work in government. You're just basically a public servant who's come up the routes. And yes, you'll have various skills, but these are highly specialised skills. We want them in one place.
All right. Foreign buyers will be back?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really important that we understand that this country lacks capital, but also foreign buyers in terms of productive purchases, so things that employ people, not just go out buying houses from people. I don't have a problem with foreign buyers coming in if their role is going to be building houses for other people. No problem with that. But really, we do need to have foreign buyers in terms of productive assets.
So no absentee owners?
No, it's not the absentee owners as such. It's actually, are you going to be putting money in where it's going to be building houses, subdivisions for people, or are you going to be actually employing New Zealanders? Where high-end foreign investment will be in the tech sector in particular.
Social housing, the government would argue, Kiwi Build's been a failure, but social housing, they've built thousands of houses. Have they built thousands of houses because they've changed the rules and some of the people don't ever leave the social housing that they built? Do those rules get changed? And if so, how?
Right. Well, we're putting out policy today, but I'll give you a bit of a flavour of it. So in terms of the houses that have been built, about 5,000 state houses have been built. They were all consented, started, planned under national anyway, because it takes years to build houses these days. So that's nothing new. I think we do need more social housing, but I'm also very keen on community housing providers such as Housing Foundation, because they do a better job for tenants.
So you get the private sector back involved?
Well, they're the community sector. You know, they're NGOs and the charities, and they actually are passionate about looking after people.
Government can't do it all.
Well, government can't do everything, but I don't see that's a big difference. I've got no problem with it. The other big thing is, you know, why wouldn't we say to state tenants who have been paying rent all their lives and doing a good job, yeah, you can buy your house.
Brief break, come back and talk about education shortly. Judith Collins with us, leader of the National Party, 8:14. Our guest until 9 this morning. On education, we talked briefly about the polytechs earlier on and the upheaval of the polytech industry in general. Charter schools work?
Yes, they do.
And so that was an ACT idea.
Yes.
You've embraced it. They work. They're back.
Yes, they are.
NCEA as an idea, does it work?
For some kids, but for other kids it doesn't, which is why it's important to have alternatives such as the Cambridge exams and the International Baccalaureate. It is important for some kids to do that. And I think the trouble with the NCEA, when I look at it, Mike, to be frank, there's too many photography classes, too much media studies, too much woke stuff, which is great, except that there's not jobs in those areas. And you know what I really love? A big focus on STEM subjects of science, technology, engineering and
Are you going
maths.
to do anything about it?
Yeah, so we've got 1,000 scholarships for kids in low decile schools to go on to study in those science, maths, technology areas, but also recognising that we have financial illiteracy amongst kids and their parents, and one of the ways of dealing with that is actually to have financial literacy as part of the curriculum and needs to be taught. And just to give you an example, basically that's economics. It's like where money comes from, how you make it, supply and demand, things like that, but actually making it less theoretical and more practical about how you get stuff done, how you buy a house.
National and government last time had a crack but backed off on performance pay for teachers. Would you revisit that at all or not?
Well, we haven't revisited that, but you know what I also would say is that we need more teachers in science, technology, maths. And what I am seeing, and I've seen it when I've been to a provider of, tertiary provider in terms of they train teachers, there's a lot of people have lost their jobs, and whether they're geologists or whatever, and highly qualified people, they're actually taking up teaching. So what I'm seeing is we may well have the teachers available to do this now, but it will be because the economy has turned to custard.
China, friend or foe?
Both. So I think we should be realistic about it. China is about China. And no one's going to look after New Zealand like New Zealand will. So it is our biggest trading partner. It is the trade that actually got us through the global financial crisis, as well as a good government. But it is one which takes most of our agricultural products. So we need to always be very careful how we tread that. But in terms of our security relationships, we're part of the Five Eyes Agreement. I'm absolutely committed to that.
Do you trust them?
Trust the Chinese as much as I trust any foreign government.
Do you worry about soft money and influence in the Pacific,
yeah,
for example?
I do actually, but I also see that in other countries as well. China's not the only player in that game. That's one of the reasons for doubling the budget of the Serious Fraud Office and change their name to Serious Fraud and Anti-Corruption Office. It's really our agency. It's really important that we take this very seriously.
Do we get value for money from our aid in the Pacific?
I think one of the things that probably not. I think the best thing that we get value for money from would be the RSE schemes. Actually bringing in workers from the Pacific to come and work in our horticultural orchards and farms. What that actually does is it takes money back into the Pacific, into the villages where it needs to be. I've seen some of our aid projects in the Pacific. Mostly they bring in New Zealanders to come and do the work, building structures, and that's what all countries do. And then they just leave them, and there's no maintenance done or anything else. The best thing to do is actually to build the economy in the Pacific. And to me, a lot of our aid could be, let's say, it could be better used. I don't mind about building roads. I do mind about what's called capacity development of trade unions in the Pacific. That's the last thing that the Pacific needs.
All right, come back and talk about Maori seats in just a moment. 8:21. Yep.
Good location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With OneRoof, you'll find all the information you need, from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with OneRoof.
It's the most important election in a generation, so we're putting the questions you want answered to the politicians vying to lead the nation for the next 3 years. From COVID-19 and border security to the economic slump it's brought with it, we'll get the leaders' plans for jobs, education, housing, the environment and healthcare. From the front gate, farm gate, or the front line, submit your video questions to us on your favourite social platform for the leaders of National, Labour, ACT, the Greens and New Zealand First, and watch live as we put them to the parties on nzherald.co.nz. It's your vote, so we're getting your questions answered at New Zealand's home of Election 2020.
How do you know when something's real? Is it real if you've read it, heard it, seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. How do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
Leader of the National Party, Judith Collins, for the next 35 minutes. We'll do a bit of personal stuff between 8:30 and 9. Here we go. Maori seats, yes or no?
Oh, well, they're there. So
you don't want to do anything about it?
I'm not worried about them because I figure they're there and not worth the hassle, frankly. In terms of getting rid of them, it's National Party policy that we won't have them. But my view is at the next election we'll probably stand people in them because we've been working for some time. This group called basically trying to get the group, some structure there. But you know what? They are a relic of the past, and under MMP they shouldn't have been needed. But Labour loves them because they generally hold them.
Maori wards for councils?
I don't know that that's necessary. I think it's not something that I've ever promoted. I also think too is if I look at some of the people who happen to be Maori who we've got in general seats in electorates, like Shane Reti, Simon Bridges, Haratia Pango, people who are very, very definitely Maori, no doubt about that one in people's minds, and yet, everybody votes them. So what can I say? I say, look, seriously, do you really need to have that?
Let's open it up more generally. I only got 30 seconds before the news, but we'll do it. What do you say to people who are afraid that this is like, we're happy, we're locked down, yes, we owe a lot of money, no, I can't go to Australia, but Jacinda's wonderful, and that's our lot.
Okay, what I'm going to say this is that sometimes the worst and most risky thing you can do is to do nothing, actually. And, there are some people who say, how can you, do a job like this where, you could say something, it could be wrong and you could get into trouble. You know what? The alternative is you do nothing, say nothing, and it gets you into no trouble because nobody actually cares. And ultimately, if this country doesn't get moving, if it doesn't have a vision for change, if there is not a better way, then we're just going to see our standard of living continue to drop as our debts mount up. And that is not the way forward. That is not a better way, and we have a better way.
Leader of the National Party, Judith Collins, will do a bit of rapid fire in the final half hour of the program after the news, which is next.
Till the lights go.
Read the
Good location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With OneRoof, you'll find all the information you need from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with OneRoof.
How can you tell what's real? Is it real if you've read it, heard it, seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. But how do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
Leaders Breakfast with Judith Collins continues next on the Mike Hosking Breakfast. Thanks to Bailey's Real Estate. This is Newstalk ZB News.
Good morning. It's 8:30. I'm Nivareti Manu. Judith Collins claims New Zealand's fossil fuels have nothing to do with climate change. If elected, the National Party promises to repeal the government's ban on new gas and oil exploration. The party's leader warns current Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is just stoking up fear. Judith Collins told Mike Hosking, "We have the potential to be the North Sea of the Southern Hemisphere."
With the seismic testing I've seen when I was Minister of Energy and Resources off the east coast of the South Island, there's enough there, according to the geologists, for basically looks like a North Sea.
And Auckland Council will come under scrutiny if National wins power. The party wants to launch an extensive review into the performance of Auckland Council's controlled organisations. Terms of reference and reviewers would be put in place within the first 100 days and updated legislation enforced by March 2022. Leader Judith Collins says somebody has to do it.
Auckland Council's own review of their own performance had about 25% of people thinking they were doing anything useful. So it's time that it happened.
Judith Collins will be with Mike Hosking until 9 a.m. Jacinda Ardern's Leaders Breakfast is next Monday. Anxious times around the Lake Ohau-Twizel area. It's feared as many as 50 structures have been levelled by the almost 5,000 hectare blaze, with residents still unable to get to the village. Newstalk ZB contributor Matt Gunn says fire and emergency investigators have been at the site, with fire chiefs due to report soon on the status of their homes. He says the evacuated people are shell-shocked.
Well, as you can imagine, you are packed up and rushed out of a major fire in the middle of the night. I think a lot of people still weren't fully conscious of exactly what had happened or was still happening and still is.
And the fire's expected to be under control by this afternoon. Fire and Emergency Commander Steve Jones says it's been contained in a basin between the lake and Quail Ridge Road.
We have enough ground crews here and we have enough helicopters to really go on the attack and actually try and keep this thing before it gets any further. So that's our aim today, to have it well contained and under control.
Teams of 14 crews are on attack, with 11 helicopters expected to join the efforts this morning. Criticism over mixed messaging about the US president's recovery. Donald Trump is expected to be back in the White House tomorrow, despite being rushed to hospital over the weekend and receiving treatment usually reserved for severe COVID cases. US correspondent Richard Arnold told Mike Hosking it's not the first time doctors have had to toe the party line when reporting on the president's health, comparing it to Ronald Reagan.
It was a lucky escape, the world was told. The president was heroic, he was doing well. Turns out that wasn't true at all. Ronald Reagan came close to dying from that assassination attempt.
University of Auckland students claim COVID-19 will cause extra stress if they have to sit exams in person. The university plans to have students in New Zealand sit exams in person, while those overseas will sit them online and open book. More than 24 students have contacted Newstalk ZB with concerns, and the Auckland University Students Association has written an open letter calling for exams to go online. Association Acting President Emma Rogers says many students are stressed by the pandemic and feel a lot of uncertainty. She says New Zealand could change alert levels again quickly, and keeping exams online is another way of being prepared. That's Newstalk ZB News. With Fisher Funds Managed Investments, expect greater lifetime savings.
To Newstalk ZB Sport, Poland's Iga Świątek has caused the upset of the fourth round at the French Tennis Open, ousting top seed Simona Halep in straight sets. The 54th ranked 19-year-old had lost to Halep at the same stage last year, but summoned up a switcheroo.
I can handle the pressure, so everything went well. I did everything that my coach told me about tactics. It was kind of like perfect match for me.
Dominic Thiem's beaten Hugo Gaston in 5 sets to make his 5th consecutive Roland Garros quarter-final. A full circle moment for Hawke's Bay's Gareth Evans after claiming the Ranfurly Shield off Otago in the Mitre 10 Cup. It's the 3rd time the Magpies have claimed the Loggerwood in just over 7 years. The first of those in 2013 saw them take the trophy off an Otago side in which Evans featured. He says losing it then gives a sense of perspective now.
A little bit bittersweet, really, coming down here and doing it with Hawke's Bay. So, yeah, it's awesome just to come on and contribute to a good young team that's growing with confidence each week.
Mitre 10 Cup with Kennard's hire equipment to make your job easy. Cricket's Indian Premier League's launched an investigation after a player at this year's tournament in the UAE has reported being approached for possible corruption. The player and franchise haven't been identified. The IPL was rocked by an illegal betting scandal in 2013, which led to 2 suspensions for its Chennai and Rajasthan franchises. Hosting this year's tournament in a biosecure bubble is expected to make it harder for illegal gambling rings to approach players. Aston Villa have a 4-1 lead over Liverpool early in the second half of their Premier League football match at Villa Park. Earlier, 10-man Manchester United suffered a record-equalling 6-1 defeat at home to Tottenham. And a fortnight after the disappointment of losing the Tour de France yellow jersey, Jumbo-Visma's Primož Roglic has won the Liège-Bastogne-Liège, a one-day cycling classic in Belgium. The Slovenian triumphed on the hilly 257k race in a sprint finish. In an embarrassing footnote, world champion Julian Alaphilippe raised his arms in triumph, thinking he'd crossed first. Alaphilippe then faced further indignity, relegated for not holding his line in the sprint. I'm Andrew Alderson, and that's Newstalk ZB News and Sport to 25 minutes to 9.
Newstalk ZB Auckland. Time saver traffic.
Need to sell your car fast? Talk to Turner's Cars. Now the Southern Motorway City-bound, moderate to heavy from Panama Road. The Northern Motorway City-bound slow coming in from Sunset Road. Northwestern moderate to heavy flow City-bound from Pataki. Southwestern southbound approaching Hillsborough Road. You do have a moderate run. No delays on Upper Harbour Motorway. Book an appraisal online and sell your car today. Turner's Cars. Ivanka Zonich for Time Saver Traffic.
Newstalk ZB Weather Watch 24/7 with 0800 Roof Care for up to 15 years guarantee on roof painting. Monaco, southwest 10 knots. Waitemata and the Hodaki Gulf, southwest 10, easing to variable 5 this morning. Northerly 10 developing for a time this afternoon. And Bream head to Cape Colville, southwest 15 knots, but 20 about the Colville Channel, easing to variable 5 knots everywhere this morning, becoming northerly 10 later. High tide at Auckland 10:30 this morning, Onehunga 1:30 this afternoon. Today fine apart from some morning and evening cloud. Tomorrow expect morning cloud then fine spells. Today's high 20. Currently we're sitting on 13 degrees here at Newstalk ZB.
Judith Collins in the hot seat. It's the Leaders' Breakfast on the Mike Hosking Breakfast with Bailey's Real Estate. Altogether better across residential, commercial, rural and property services. Newstalk ZB.
23 minutes away from 9. Jacinda Ardern, 7 through 9 this coming Monday. This time next week, in other words, this Thursday between 7:30 and 9, the minor party leaders for half an hour each. Our remaining moments with Judith Collins for now, though. A couple of wash-up issues. MMP in general. David Seymour will be back because of the Epsom deal. It looks like in the polls he may well have some momentum, bring in some extra MPs. If the Greens don't make it, that's basically MMP shot to pieces, isn't it? We've taken a system over 24 years or whatever it is and we've decided we don't like it. Does it need revisiting or not?
I think MMP is a very dysfunctional way of running a government, running parliament, and certainly what people have seen, I think, over the years is almost everybody tells me how much they hate MMP and they don't understand it. And yet, strangely enough, they voted for it last time we actually had this vote, which is, from memory, was 2014. It is very dysfunctional. However, if the election ends up with, 3 parties in Parliament, we will have effectively sorted out MMP and the very minor parties involved. One of the things that I was most concerned to do when I was Minister of Justice was to make sure we didn't get down to the craziness of people with 1 or 2% in the polls ending up getting representation in Parliament, because what you end up with that is utter disaster. And we've seen it in other countries where nothing gets done. So, I'm not a great fan of MMP, but I will say there's one thing about MMP that's useful, and that is that at least everybody's vote counts, and that's a good thing.
Explain to me why we need, and so even Labor's come to the decision now that we don't need 20 DHBs. Why do we need 20 DHBs?
Well, some places are going to need their own, because otherwise they just, the thought of everybody coming out of Wellington, for instance, deciding what's going to happen in places is not going to work on the West Coast. I mean, Wellington just despises the West Coast. You can see it in their whole actions around mining and agriculture. They just don't get it, or even fisheries. But Shane Retty, who's our health spokesman, he's been on DHB in Northland before he became a politician. He said to me that it's not the DHB numbers that are the problem, Judith, it's the fact that some of them are dysfunctional, some aren't working properly. And again, I go back to my first thing I said to you really this morning, which is you don't actually build a better culture and better organisation by just taking dysfunctional ones, adding them all together and calling everyone a chief executive. What you do need to do is to address this. There's nothing wrong with DHBs, for instance, working together on various things. So in Auckland, we've got 3 DHBs. Should we just have 1? Possibly. But then I'd say this, the Auckland Council itself has actually proven that big is not always better. Sometimes you do need people who have a stake in the ground in South Auckland or a stake in the ground in the North Shore. Maybe, that's what you do need. It's not, but there's nothing wrong with them working together. So you have, for instance, centres of excellence. You have the cancer treatment in one organisation, rather than the other. And that's what you can do with DHBs. What I also know, Mike, is there's nothing like failing governments to blame. Let's have a restructure. We need something to do. We need something to say. We need something to explain our failures. And immunisations is something else. I tell you what, we'll shove them all together and restructure. That's what failing businesses do, and it's what failing governments do.
All right. Go back to Christchurch and the previous government. I ask this simply because the court case the other week, Southern Response and the way it handled Christchurch. Is that a disgrace?
Well, I thought some of the decisions were wrong. Obviously, the one relating to Mr. and Mrs. Dodds was a particular example where it was basically untruthful in dealing with the Dodds, and that was showing up in the court cases. Look, it was an insurance company, which it was previously AMI, I think was the name of it, and we had to take it over because it would gone broke, in which case people would have got nothing from it. But ultimately, a culture needs to be about understanding that we took it over not so it could be basically cruel, hard and untruthful to people. We expect them to do the right thing.
There's potentially a class action that comes out of it, though, that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Does that then reflect back on the national government as it was then and their handling of Christchurch?
I think we'd have to think about. I need to get some advice on that, Mike. I think the issue is that if we hadn't taken it over, there would have been no money to people. They wouldn't have got anything because AMI was broke. So that's the problem with having these small insurance companies, is they can't actually cope with the disasters. So was there some handling issues? Clearly, the government wasn't actually making decisions about individual houses and decisions, but I would have thought that any class action or anything else, we just have to have a look at it and say, yeah, okay, some things weren't excellent. I tell you what, we could have just left it, and that would have been significantly worse.
The gun support, the parts you did support in this last term, has that led voters to act? Do you think?
Possibly has.
And do you regret it?
No, because I think you have to just do the right thing that you believe is the right thing at the time. And I don't see any way that AR-15s, in other words, basically semi-automatic machine guns, essentially, are being used or should be treated like other firearms. Very specialist reasons to be using them. One of them is pest control, and the other one is the shooters, the international shooters, who have competitions in them. But there's no way that they should be used for deer hunting or anything else.
The stuff you inherited, given you came late to the piece, given all that's happened, have you managed to reshape it in a way that reflects you and what you see the National Party being, or not?
Yes, if you're talking about policies, yes, absolutely. You can see the tech policy that we put out. That's me. You can see here around the RMA the absolute commitment there. That is very much me. You'll also see it in terms of the boldness that we've been able to address things like the 90-day trial period. You can see that is something I absolutely believe in. You'll see that in terms of some of the issues around tax. Yeah, it's absolutely believe in that we need to have an adrenaline push into the economy, but we also fiscal stimulus, but we also need to have a plan to come out from that, which is infrastructure. That was already being done anyway, but the absolute focus on things like an infrastructure bank so that government departments don't get ripped off, and also that they don't rip off other people.
All right, we'll come back with a little bit of rapid fire to wrap this up in a moment. Judith Collins, more in a moment. 16 to 9.
Location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With OneRoof, you'll find all the information you need, from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with OneRoof.
How can you tell what's real? Is it real if you've read it, heard it, seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. But how do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
It is 13 minutes away from 9. Our remaining moments with the leader of the National Party, Judith Collins. Just some random thoughts I had yesterday afternoon. Just some ideas. New Zealand business leader you most admire?
I would say actually the Todd family of all. So it's not a particular leader because they've contributed so much to New Zealand, but they've also been able to do so in a way that they've been able to keep their family together, which is highly unusual.
The politician who made the greatest contribution to our country in modern political history.
Right. So I should say national, but I won't. I'm going to say Roger Douglas, actually. I think Roger Douglas made the single biggest impact in terms of our economy. And under David Lange, he was able to do that until they had a falling out. So there we go.
Have you worried ever about getting COVID?
No, I haven't. But I must say I am careful to make sure that I sanitise and I wear the mask, but I'm not that worried about it.
The amount of hate that you receive to your face?
Almost nil. It's normally keyboard warriors. And I've found in social media in particular, it's really easy. You block them, you mute them, block them, delete them. Whatever you do, just ignore them.
Have you been a victim of crime?
Yes, I have. Burglaries.
Burglaries?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Some years ago.
A charity you admire and the role that charity plays in this country generally?
Okay. I would instantly comes to my mind as SPCA, and that's because I love animals. But there are plenty of other charities that do good work. I think it's just inherently something. I love animals.
A subject you could bore us witless on?
RMA. I have bored you witless on it. I have. I can bore you witless on that, but I can also bore you witless on all sorts of things like that. But I think RMA would be the one I'd do.
If you could form a grand coalition, but you had to recruit from other parties, give me half a dozen names that you would be genuinely interested in hiring.
From the Labour Party?
Labour, New Zealand First.
All right, Labour. I think Megan Woods is capable and hardworking. I think she doesn't. We don't share the same viewpoints on almost anything. Chris Hipkins is one of the few people that Jacinda Ardern can rely on. In terms of who else from there? No. I like Ron Mark in New Zealand First. He's genuine and he cares about his portfolios of defence veterans. I like Tracy Martin, even though she doesn't necessarily like National, but she's not a bad person. I think Shane Jones has some good points, but the problem is he always lets himself down when it comes to work ethic. So no. Other parties, the Greens. I know that people will be strange about this, but I quite like the youth and naive. I should say this. I try not to say that a word that's mean, but naive belief and self-belief that Chloe Swarbrick has. I can't help but to admire that and see in her myself at that age, where I thought I knew all the answers and I actually didn't know anything. But I do like her gutsiness and her self-belief. I like David Seymour in the ACT Party, even though he does, Dancing with Stars, I think was a mistake. But I like him personally because he's a person of principle.
It's not a bad collection. We'll come and wrap this up in just a couple of moments. 9 minutes away from 9.
Good location, eh?
It is. The median sale price is up 6.2%. Your work is 23 minutes away. And we're in zone for a great primary school.
School? Why does that matter?
Are you ready to settle on a new home? With OneRoof, you'll find all the information you need from thousands of in-depth listings, sales data, suburb information, property records and much more. Be property prepared with OneRoof.
How do you know when something's real? Is it real if you've read it, heard it, seen it? The story is a story as soon as it's been shared. How do you know you can believe it?
Believe it when you read it in New Zealand's Herald.
G'day, I'm Sam, and here at driven.co.nz, we've got a nifty toolbox to help make buying and selling a car easier. Selling, but not sure what price to put on it? Our car value calculator will give you a really good starting point. If you're buying a new car, our cost to run tool will give you a rough estimate of what the car will cost you each year to run. We can also tell you the best time to sell so you get the sweetest possible return. Check out the toolbox at driven.co.nz.
Judith Collins on the Mike Hosking Breakfast with HP on Newstalk ZB.
Judith Collins, remaining moments is 7 away from 9. We'll see if we can do all of this. Has the media been soft on Labor in the last 3 years?
Oh, absolutely.
In all seriousness.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the complete lack of delivery has been completely ignored, and some people have done their best around things like Kiwi Build, but actually now you never even hear the media asking Jacinda Ardern about it. I mean, it's just $2 billion, the biggest policy failure ever, the biggest promises. Yeah, of course they've been soft.
What trait, aspect of life or relationship do you struggle with most?
I struggle with sucking up, actually, Mike. I really do, and I've learnt not to bother. Just say what I think, and what you get from me is not always it's not, or it hasn't always been, let's say, thought through to the extent of saying, could someone be offended? I'll just say what I think, and I've learnt that's the best way.
What's your final message that you want people to take away from this morning, apart from Vote National?
Right, well, apart from Vote National, party vote, the message is this, is that doesn't matter what you're seeing at the moment, what is actually happening in the economy is that businesses are currently failing, small businesses in particular, and businesses, and not only in the tourism sector but elsewhere. We have issues around the supply chain, for instance. We have issues around qualifications and experience, and what we're seeing is that the government at the moment has no idea about what to do. Their only plan is to keep borders locked and to talk COVID. Our plan has to be around a better way, and that is actually about growing the economy, and that we do have a plan to do it. The economy is key. We can't have health funding without money. We can't have education funding without money. We can't do anything without money, and that money can't just keep being printed.
We've got 60 seconds left, and it's slightly unfair to ask you, seeing there's still 10 days to go. Where do you think everything lands on the Saturday night? First of all, the cannabis vote.
The cannabis vote will be a no, in my opinion, and I think that's why Jacinda Ardern won't say where she's voting.
The euthanasia vote?
That will be a yes, in my opinion.
The Greens up or out?
I think the Greens have a real opportunity to leave Parliament and free themselves from the strictures of it.
Are you saying that in all honesty because you want them to, or because you genuinely think that's going to happen?
Well, both. I really want them to go.
New Zealand first, up or out?
They're out. Yeah. National
versus Labour on the night.
I think National and ACT together can actually do it. We could do it, and I know it is almost impossible according to all the pundits, but they also wrongly called Brexit. They also wrongly called Scott Morrison. They wrongly called Boris Johnson. Actually, I think there's a huge majority out there who are sitting there saying, yeah, hang on, and what about me?
Appreciate your time very much this morning. Go well for the next 2 weeks. It is 3 minutes away from 9. We're back tomorrow morning, regular programming, and the next Leaders Breakfast will be on Thursday morning at 7:30 with the minor leaders. Happy days.
Before you go.
Hi, David Seymour here, leader of ACT. We're overdue and honest.